Red and blue strobe lights sliced through the pitch-black night, reflecting off the damp asphalt. The cold, heavy steel of the handcuffs bit brutally into Naomi's wrists as she was shoved violently against the side of the police cruiser. Officer Vance Keller leaned in close, his breath smelling of stale coffee and arrogance, a nasty smirk playing on his lips. "You people always think you can drive through Oakridge like you own the place," he sneered, tightening the cuffs another notch. "Let's see how arrogant you are when I book you for resisting." Naomi didn't flinch. She didn't cry. Instead, she locked her piercing dark eyes onto his, the corners of her mouth twitching upward in a chillingly calm smile. "Officer Keller," she said, her voice cutting through the hum of the cruiser's engine like a razor, "I highly suggest you remove these cuffs, because tomorrow morning I am stepping in as your new police captain, and you are officially suspended." The affluent suburb of Oakridge was the kind of town where the lawns were manicured with mathematical precision. The driveways were paved with imported cobblestone, and the secrets were buried deep beneath layers of old money and localized corruption. It sat just outside the city, an insular bubble of wealth that operated by its own unspoken rules. The Oakridge Police Department wasn't there to serve and protect the general public. It was a taxpayer-funded private security firm for the town's elite. Naomi Langford knew this all too well. At 48, she had spent over 2 decades climbing the ranks of the Philadelphia Police Department. She had started as a beat cop, working her way up through vice, catching a bullet in her shoulder during a botched raid, and eventually finding her true calling in internal affairs. Naomi was a fixer. She was the woman the brass sent in when a precinct had gone rogue, when the rot had spread too deep for a simple reprimand. She was meticulous, unyielding, and possessed a quiet, terrifying authority that commanded respect from everyone who crossed her path. Weeks ago, the state attorney general had personally called her into his office. Oakridge was under a shadow investigation. There had been too many civil rights lawsuits, too many unexplained disappearances of evidence, and an alarming rate of racially motivated traffic stops that ended in brutality. The previous chief of police had abruptly retired with a golden parachute when the state started asking questions. The town needed a clean sweep, and Naomi was the broom. It was late on a Tuesday night. Naomi was driving her slate-gray BMW 5 Series, a retirement gift to herself after her last promotion, down the winding tree-lined stretch of Route 9 that served as the main artery into Oakridge. She wanted to get a feel for the town before her official swearing-in ceremony the next morning. She wore a simple tailored black blazer over a cream-colored silk blouse, her natural hair pulled back into a neat, professional bun. The jazz playing softly through the car's speakers was the only sound accompanying the steady hum of her tires. A short distance behind her, sitting idle in the darkened parking lot of an abandoned strip mall, was car 42. Inside the patrol cruiser sat Officer Vance Keller and his rookie partner, Officer Bryce Nolan. Keller was a second-generation Oakridge cop. He was 32, built like a linebacker, and carried himself with an entitled swagger that came from knowing the mayor played golf with his father. Keller didn't police. He hunted. He viewed anyone who didn't fit the specific demographic of Oakridge as a trespasser. Nolan, on the other hand, was fresh out of the academy. He was 23, nervous, and desperate to earn Keller's approval, often turning a blind eye to his training officer's blatantly illegal tactics. "Look at this," Keller muttered, breaking the silence in the cruiser. He sat up straighter, his eyes locked on the sleek BMW gliding past their hiding spot. Nolan blinked, leaning forward. "Look at what? Car's not speeding, doing exactly the limit." Keller scoffed, dropping the cruiser into drive. "It's a brand new Beamer, dark tint, and look who's driving." Nolan squinted through the windshield as they pulled out onto Route 9, trailing a few hundred yards behind the BMW. "Looks like a middle-aged woman." "A black woman, Bryce," Keller corrected, his tone dripping with condescension. "In a $100,000 car, driving into Oakridge at this hour on a Tuesday. She doesn't live here, which means she's either lost or she's moving weight. Nobody from the city comes up this way just for the scenery." "Vance, we don't have probable cause," Nolan said, his voice tightening. The academy rules were still fresh in his head. "She's maintaining her lane. Plates are clean." "Probable cause is whatever I write in the report, rookie," Keller snapped, accelerating to close the distance. "Watch and learn." She crossed the double yellow, failure to maintain lane, suspicion of DUI. "She didn't cross the line," Nolan whispered, though he knew better than to argue further. Keller reached forward and flipped the switch. Instantly, the dark, quiet road exploded in a dizzying array of flashing red and blue strobes. The siren let out a short, aggressive wail, a harsh command to submit. Up ahead, Naomi glanced in her rearview mirror. She sighed, a slow, deep breath that settled her heart rate. She had spent decades behind the badge. She knew exactly what this was. She hadn't swerved. She hadn't sped. She was simply existing in the wrong zip code. Instead of panic, a cold, calculated analytical switch flipped in her brain. She was no longer just a driver. She was an internal affairs investigator gathering evidence. She immediately hit a right turn signal, acknowledging the officers. But she didn't slam on her brakes. Route 9 was dark and possessed no shoulder. Procedurally, for the safety of both the driver and the officers, one was supposed to pull over in a well-lit area. Naomi maintained her speed, driving until she spotted the glowing canopy of an all-night Texaco gas station. She smoothly pulled into the lot, parking beneath the bright fluorescent lights, well out of the flow of traffic. Behind her, Keller slammed the cruiser into park, his face flushed with sudden anger. "Oh, we got a runner," he growled. "She didn't run, Vance. She just pulled into the light," Nolan pointed out nervously. "She didn't stop when I told her to stop," Keller barked, unbuckling his seatbelt. "That's evading. Hand on your weapon, Bryce. This one thinks she's smart." Naomi shifted the BMW into park, turned off the engine, and rolled down all 4 of her windows. A standard safety procedure to ensure the officers had full visibility into the vehicle. She placed both of her hands flat on the top of the steering wheel at the 10 and 2 positions, fingers spread wide. She kept her posture relaxed but rigid. In her side mirror, she watched Officer Keller approach. He was doing everything wrong. He wasn't using the patrol car for cover. He was walking with a heavy, aggressive stomp, his right hand resting firmly on the butt of his unholstered service weapon. It was an intimidation tactic, pure and simple. Nolan approached the passenger side, lingering near the rear quarter panel, looking visibly uncomfortable. Keller stopped at her window. He didn't lean down. He stood tall, forcing Naomi to look up at him. A classic power play. He shone his heavy Maglite flashlight directly into her eyes, blinding her temporarily. "License, registration, and proof of insurance now," Keller demanded. "No good evening. No, I pulled you over because..." He just barked an order. Naomi squinted against the harsh glare, but kept her voice entirely level. Good evening, officer. May I ask why I am being stopped? Keller lowered the flashlight just enough to illuminate his own smirking face. I ask the questions. You give me your papers. Unless you want me to pull you out of this vehicle right now. Officer, I am perfectly willing to provide my documentation, Naomi replied, her tone measured, almost soothing, which only infuriated Keller more. But legally, you're required to articulate the reason for this traffic stop. I have my hands on the wheel for your safety and mine. My purse is on the passenger seat. I will retrieve my ID as soon as you tell me why I was pulled over. Keller leaned his forearm against the roof of her pristine car, scratching the clear coat with the metal button of his uniform sleeve. You were swerving, crossing the double yellow. You look intoxicated to me. I see, Naomi said calmly. She mentally logged the lie. I assure you I haven't had a drop of alcohol, nor did I cross the center line. My dash cam is currently recording, which will verify my driving. The mention of the dash cam made Keller's jaw clench. He despised citizens who knew their rights, and he despised them even more when they had proof. He decided to escalate. This was his town. He was the law. Step out of the vehicle, Keller commanded, his voice dropping an octave. Officer, I am not refusing to identify myself. I will give you my license. Ordering me out of the car without reasonable suspicion of a crime or a safety threat is a violation of protocol, Naomi stated factually. She was quoting from the state's police manual, practically verbatim. I'm giving you a lawful order. Step out of the car, or you're under arrest for obstruction and resisting, Keller shouted, his hand gripping the handle of his gun tighter. On the other side of the car, Nolan flinched at the sudden volume. Vance, maybe we just get her ID, Nolan started to say through the open passenger window. Shut up, Nolan, Keller snapped. He turned his attention back to Naomi. 3, 2, 1. Before Naomi could unbuckle her seatbelt to comply with the escalating situation, Keller reached through the open window, grabbed the handle, and violently yanked the door open. He lunged in, grabbing Naomi by her left arm, his fingers digging painfully into her bicep through the fabric of her blazer. Do not touch me, Naomi said, her voice finally losing its soft edge, replaced by a commanding boom that echoed across the empty gas station lot. It was the voice she used on rioters and rogue cops alike. It carried weight. Keller ignored it. He hauled her out of the driver's seat with brute force. Naomi, staying entirely limp to avoid any physical action that could be construed as resisting, was dragged out onto the concrete. Her knee hit the ground hard, tearing her stockings and scraping the skin. But she bit her lip, refusing to give him the satisfaction of a cry of pain. Keller spun her around, slamming her chest against the side of the BMW. He kicked her legs apart far wider than necessary. Put your hands behind your back, he yelled, though he was already yanking her arms backward with unnecessary torque. Naomi complied immediately, letting her arms go loose. She felt the cold, jagged metal of the handcuffs snap around her wrists. Keller squeezed them shut, clicking them 3 times past what was necessary. The metal bit deep into her skin, instantly cutting off the circulation to her hands. You're making a catastrophic mistake, officer, Naomi said, her cheek pressed against the cool metal of her car. She wasn't angry anymore, she was entirely clinical. She was assessing a broken system, and Vance Keller was Exhibit A. "The only mistake here is you coming into my town," Keller whispered harshly into her ear. He grabbed her by the shoulder and marched her roughly toward the front of his patrol car, shoving her into the glare of his own headlights. "Stand there. Don't move." Keller turned back to her car. "Nolan, search the vehicle. Find the drugs or the open containers." Nolan stepped forward, looking pale. "Vance, we can't search the car. We don't have a warrant, and the arrest was for obstruction, not a vehicle-related crime. An inventory search isn't justified unless we're towing it." Keller glared at the rookie over the roof of the BMW. "I smell marijuana, Nolan, don't you? Smells like probable cause to me. Toss the car." Naomi stood in the blinding light of the cruiser, her hands throbbing behind her back. She watched as Nolan, visibly trembling and compromised, opened her passenger door and began rifling through her belongings. He opened her center console, tossed her glove box, and finally picked up her designer leather purse. "Bring the bag here," Keller ordered. Nolan walked over, handing the purse to his senior officer, like a reluctant servant offering tribute. Keller dumped the contents onto the hood of his patrol car. Lipstick, a set of keys, a pack of gum, a cell phone, and a slim black leather wallet spilled out. Keller snatched up the wallet. "Let's see who we have here. Let's see what kind of warrants you're hiding, lady." The gas station parking lot was eerily silent, save for the crackle of the police radio and the rhythmic sweep of the cruiser's light bar. Naomi stood perfectly still. The pain in her wrists was a dull, burning ache, but her mind was razor sharp. She watched Keller's every movement. Keller flipped open the wallet. In the front window slot was her driver's license. He pulled it out, shining his flashlight on the plastic card. "Naomi Langford," he read aloud, his voice dripping with mock politeness. "Well, Naomi, let's see what the computer has to say about you." He didn't bother looking through the rest of the wallet. If he had just flipped the leather partition, he would have seen the heavy gold shield and the laminated Department of Justice clearance card tucked securely inside. But Keller was lazy, relying on his arrogance rather than thoroughness. He tossed the wallet back onto the hood of the cruiser and walked over to the open window of his patrol car, leaning in to use the mobile data terminal mounted on the dashboard. Nolan stood a few feet away from Naomi, shifting his weight from foot to foot. He couldn't meet her eyes. "Officer Nolan, is it?" Naomi said quietly. Nolan startled, looking up. Yes, ma'am. You know this is an illegal search. You know the initial stop lacked probable cause. And you know excessive force was used during this arrest," Naomi stated. She wasn't asking him, she was telling him. "When the inquiry happens, your compliance will be viewed as complicity. Just something to think about." Nolan swallowed hard, his throat dry. I'm just following orders, ma'am." "I was just following orders hasn't been a valid legal defense since 1945, son," Naomi replied coolly. Inside the cruiser, Keller was typing her driver's license number into the state database. He hit enter and waited for the screen to populate. Usually it took seconds. This time the screen buffered. A red progress bar loaded slowly. Then the screen flashed solid yellow. Keller frowned. Yellow wasn't a warrant. Red was a warrant. Yellow was a system flag. He leaned closer to the screen. A dialog box popped up in bold black text. Restricted file. Clearance level 5 required. Do not detain. Notify supervisor immediately. Subject Langford Naomi A. Title: Captain, Commanding Officer, Agency, Oakridge Police Department, State DOJ Liaison. Keller stared at the screen. He blinked once, twice. His brain, saturated with adrenaline and prejudice, struggled to process the words. Captain, Commanding Officer, Oakridge PD. He shook his head, letting out a short, harsh laugh. Unbelievable, he muttered to himself. These people are making fake profiles in the state system now. Hackers got to be. It was easier for him to believe in an elaborate high-tech conspiracy than to accept the reality staring him in the face. His ego simply wouldn't allow it. He backed out of the car, slamming his hands on the door frame. He strutted back over to Naomi, waving her driver's license in her face. You think you're clever, huh? Keller spat, stepping directly into her personal space. You got some buddy at the DMV to put a block on your file. Put some fake titles on your name in the database. Do not detain. He laughed again, a cruel, echoing sound. That might work on the city cops, but it doesn't work on me. You're going to the county jail, Naomi, and your fancy little car is getting impounded. Naomi looked at him. She didn't look angry. She looked at him with profound, absolute pity. It was the look a parent gives a child who has just broken a vase and is trying to blame the dog. Are you finished? She asked, her voice dropping to a low, resonant timbre. I'm just getting started, Keller sneered. I'm going to book you for resisting, assaulting an officer, and whatever I find when I rip your car apart at the impound lot. Naomi took a slow, deep breath, expanding her chest, pulling her shoulders back despite the painful restraint of the handcuffs. She locked her eyes with his. Officer Keller, badge number 402, Naomi began, her voice carrying the unmistakable crushing weight of absolute authority. You failed to establish probable cause for this stop. You failed to articulate a reason for my detention. You issued an unlawful order. You escalated to physical violence without provocation. You initiated an illegal warrantless search of my vehicle, and you ignored a direct system-wide directive to notify a supervisor. Keller opened his mouth to shout her down, but something in her eyes, something utterly fearless and cold, made the words die in his throat. My name is Naomi Langford, she continued. Every word landed like a hammer blow in the quiet night. I spent decades in internal affairs. Weeks ago, the state attorney general signed a mandate taking operational control of this corrupt, failing precinct. And as of this morning, I am the new captain of the Oakridge Police Department. The silence that fell over the gas station was absolute. It was so quiet Naomi could hear the faint hum of the fluorescent lights overhead. Keller froze. The smirk melted off his face, replaced by a slack-jawed expression of pure, unadulterated horror. His eyes darted to Nolan, who had suddenly gone the color of spoiled milk, his hands trembling violently at his sides. You're lying, Keller whispered, but there was no conviction in his voice. The bravado had vanished, evaporating into the cold night air. He remembered the yellow screen. He remembered the text. Captain, Commanding Officer, Oakridge PD. Check the wallet, Vance, Naomi commanded, dropping the officer title, the inner flap. Keller turned slowly, mechanically, like a man walking to his own execution. He picked up the black leather wallet from the hood of the cruiser. His hands were shaking now. He flipped open the partition. There it was, a gleaming heavy gold shield, and beneath it, a Department of Justice identification card with her face on it, bearing the title, Captain Oakridge PD, State liaison. Keller dropped the wallet as if it had caught fire. It clattered against the metal of the hood. He stumbled backward, his breathing suddenly shallow and rapid. He looked at Naomi, still standing calmly in the headlights, her hands bound behind her back. "Take them off," Naomi ordered quietly. I, Keller stammered, his mind short-circuiting. The realization of what he had just done, who he had just assaulted, crashed down on him like a physical weight. He had just brutally arrested his new commanding officer, the very woman sent by the state to investigate police misconduct. "Take the cuffs off," Naomi repeated, her voice echoing like a thunderclap. And then Officer Keller, "Hand me your badge and your gun, because you are immediately and indefinitely suspended." The metallic clatter of the wallet hitting the cruiser's hood seemed to echo endlessly across the Texaco parking lot. Officer Vance Keller stood frozen, his chest heaving, his face drained of all color. The arrogant, untouchable predator who had swaggered up to Naomi's window just minutes ago was gone, replaced by a terrified man realizing the ground had just opened up beneath his feet. I didn't know," Keller stammered, his voice cracking. He took a step toward her, his hands raised in a placating gesture. "Captain, it's dark. You have to understand, we've had burglaries in the area. Do not insult my intelligence by attempting to retroactively justify a civil rights violation, Keller," Naomi interrupted, her voice slicing through the cool night air like a scalpel. "The time for excuses ended the moment you laid hands on me. The keys now—" Keller fumbled at his duty belt, his hands shaking so violently he could barely unclip his keyring. He stepped behind her, the metallic jingle of the keys betraying his panic. It took him 3 attempts to fit the small key into the cuffs. Click, click. The brutal pressure released. Naomi brought her arms forward slowly, wincing as the blood rushed back into her deeply indented, bruised wrists. She didn't rub them. She simply adjusted the cuffs of her silk blouse and smoothed down her blazer. She looked at Nolan, who was standing by the passenger side of her BMW, looking like he was about to be physically sick. "Officer Nolan, is it?" Nolan startled, looking up. Yes, ma'am." "Your body camera, is it active?" Nolan swallowed hard. "Yes, ma'am. It's been rolling since we pulled out of the strip mall." "Officer Keller. He usually turns his off for these kinds of stops, but I left mine on. I didn't feel right." Keller whipped his head around, glaring at his rookie partner with pure venom. "You little rat," he hissed. "You're supposed to be my partner." "He is a sworn officer of the law, Keller, not your accomplice," Naomi snapped, stepping between them. "And his decision to follow protocol is the only thing keeping him from sharing a cell with you tonight." Naomi reached into her coat pocket with her left hand, wincing slightly at the lingering pain in her shoulder, and retrieved her personal cell phone. She bypassed the local dispatch entirely. She dialed a direct encrypted line to the state capitol. It rang only twice. "Attorney General's office, Reynolds speaking," a deep, gravelly voice answered. "Marcus, it's Naomi Langford," she said, her tone shifting from commanding officer to weary colleague. "I'm currently standing in a Texaco parking lot on Route 9, just inside the Oakridge town line. I need 2 state trooper units dispatched to my location immediately. Code 3. There was a brief pause on the line. "Are you injured, Naomi?" Attorney General Marcus Reynolds asked, his voice tightening with concern. "Bruised but functional. I was just unlawfully detained and assaulted by one of my new subordinates, Officer Vance Keller. I need him taken into state custody. I will not have local Oakridge officers processing one of their own tonight. Troopers are on the way. Hold the scene, Captain, Reynolds said before disconnecting. Naomi lowered the phone. She turned back to Keller. Hand over your weapon, your taser, and your badge. Place them on the hood of my vehicle. Keller hesitated. Giving up his gun in this town was practically a surrender of his identity. His father, Arthur Keller, had been a heavy hitter in the Oakridge political machine for decades. Vance had never faced a consequence in his life. Captain, please. Keller tried one last time, his voice dropping to a desperate whisper. My father is Arthur Keller. He practically built this precinct. If you do this, it's going to tear the department apart. We can handle this internally. I'll take a suspension, unpaid. Just don't bring the state boys into this. Your father's legacy is precisely why I am here, Vance, Naomi replied coldly. You have 10 seconds to disarm before I add insubordination and resisting a lawful order from a superior officer to your rapidly growing list of felonies. 10, 9, defeated, humiliated and trembling. Keller unholstered his Glock 19. He cleared the chamber, dropping the magazine, and placed both items on the sleek hood of Naomi's BMW. He unclipped his taser and set it next to the firearm. Finally, with a trembling hand, he unpinned the silver Oakridge police shield from his chest and laid it down. Minutes later, the wail of distant sirens cut through the night. 2 state patrol cruisers, their blue and yellow lights flashing violently, roared into the gas station, boxing in Keller's local cruiser. 4 heavily armed state troopers piled out, hands on their weapons, eyes sweeping the scene. Lieutenant Garrett Hayes, a tall, imposing man with a stern jawline, approached Naomi. He saluted her. Captain Langford, are you all right, ma'am? I am, Lieutenant. Thank you for the quick response, Naomi said, gesturing toward Keller, who was leaning against his cruiser, head in his hands. That is Vance Keller. Arrest him for aggravated assault on a police officer, unlawful detention, official misconduct, and civil rights violations under color of law. Hayes nodded. He turned to his men. Cuff him. 2 massive troopers grabbed Keller by the arms. The irony was thick and suffocating as they slammed him against the side of his own patrol car. Keller didn't fight back. He just sobbed quietly as the steel bracelets locked around his wrists. Officer Nolan, Naomi called out. The young rookie jumped. You are to drive the patrol vehicle back to the precinct. You will surrender your body camera directly to the Internal Affairs lockbox, and you will write a full, unredacted report of tonight's events. Am I understood? Crystal clear, Captain, Nolan said, relief flooding his face. He had survived the purge. As the state troopers shoved a handcuffed, weeping Vance Keller into the back of their vehicle, Naomi retrieved her wallet and keys from the hood of the cruiser. She got back into her BMW, the leather seat familiar and comforting. The night was far from over. The real war was going to start at dawn. The next morning, the Oakridge Police Department was a hive of nervous, whispered energy. The bullpen, usually filled with boisterous laughter and the smell of cheap donuts, was dead silent. Rumors had been spreading like wildfire since midnight. The midnight shift supervisor had noticed car 42 return with only rookie Nolan inside. By early morning, the bail bondsmen were whispering that Vance Keller, the golden boy of the department, was sitting in a holding cell at the state penitentiary, denied bail by a federal magistrate. Mayor Clayton Reeves was pacing furiously inside the chief's glass-walled office, overlooking the bullpen. Reeves was a man who cared deeply about two things: his golf handicap and keeping the town's wealthy residents blissfully unaware of how the sausage was made. He was sweating through his expensive tailored suit. Beside him stood Thomas Griffin, the aggressive, red-faced police union representative, who was currently shouting into his cell phone. At exactly the appointed hour, the heavy double doors of the precinct swung open. Every head in the bullpen snapped toward the entrance. Naomi Langford walked in. She was no longer wearing her civilian clothes. She was dressed in the crisp, immaculate dress uniform of a police captain. The silver eagles gleamed on her collar. The gold braids on her shoulders commanded instant respect. Her boots were polished to a mirror shine, and her posture was rigid, imposing, and undeniably powerful. She walked slowly through the center of the room. The officers, dozens of them who had thrived under the previous corrupt regime, parted like the Red Sea. No one spoke. They just stared at the bruised rings faintly visible around her wrists, peeking out from beneath her uniform cuffs. Naomi didn't look at them. She kept her eyes locked on the glass office at the back of the room. She opened the door and stepped inside. Mayor Reeves stopped pacing, and he looked at her, his eyes darting to her rank insignia. He tried to put on his best politician smile, but it looked more like a grimace. "You must be Captain Langford. I'm Mayor Reeves. We spoke on the phone last week. Welcome to Oakridge. Although I must say we have a bit of a crisis this morning." "There is no crisis, Mayor," Naomi interrupted, walking behind the heavy oak desk and remaining standing. She placed her uniform cap on the wood. "There is simply a long overdue application of the law." Thomas Griffin, the union rep, snapped his flip phone shut and pointed a fat finger at Naomi. "You have no jurisdiction to arrest a union member without a formal internal inquiry. Keller is a decorated officer. You brought state troopers into my town, into my jurisdiction, to lock up a kid for what? A bad traffic stop?" Naomi slowly turned her gaze to Griffin. Her eyes were like black ice. "Mr. Griffin, I suggest you lower your voice and check your tone before you address me. Vance Keller is not a kid. He is an armed agent of the state who dragged a citizen from her car without probable cause, assaulted her, and attempted an illegal search. The fact that the citizen happened to be his incoming commanding officer is the only reason he is currently in a cell, rather than falsifying a report to ruin an innocent woman's life." "It was a mistake," Griffin barked. "It was dark. He thought you were a suspect." "He thought I was an easy target," Naomi corrected sharply. "He saw a black woman in an expensive car, and his immediate instinct, trained and nurtured by this very department, was to terrorize her. That ends today." Mayor Reeves stepped forward, raising his hands. "Now hold on, Captain. Let's not make this about race. Vance is a good boy. His father, Arthur, is a very important man in this community, a major donor, a former councilman. If we handle this quietly internally, Arthur will ensure the department gets the funding for those new armored vehicles we discussed. Vance can take a desk job." Naomi stared at the mayor, letting his words hang in the air. The sheer audacity of the corruption was breathtaking, but exactly what the Attorney General had warned her about. She reached into her briefcase and pulled out a thick, sealed manila folder, tossing it onto the desk. It landed with a heavy thud. "What's this?" Reeves asked, eyeing the folder nervously. "That," Naomi said, leaning forward and resting her knuckles on the desk, is the preliminary report from the Department of Justice. While Officer Keller was busy profiling me last night, my team was auditing this precinct's financial records. It seems Officer Keller and several other officers on the midnight shift haven't just been racially profiling drivers. They've been extorting them, seizing cash under civil asset forfeiture without filing the proper paperwork, and funneling the money into an off-the-books account. Griffin turned pale. The mayor took a step back, suddenly feeling very faint. Your good boy Vance wasn't just a racist, Mayor Reeves. He was a thief running a taxpayer-funded highway robbery ring. Naomi continued, her voice echoing slightly in the glass room, loud enough for the officers outside to hear the muffled tone of her fury. And Officer Nolan's body camera footage from last night captured Keller attempting to initiate an illegal search to plant evidence when he realized I didn't have any cash to steal. You can't prove that, Griffin stammered, though all the fight had drained out of him. The FBI is currently executing a search warrant on Arthur Keller's primary residence and Vance Keller's locker as we speak, Naomi stated, checking her watch. So yes, Mr. Griffin, I believe we can. She stood up straight, adjusting her jacket. Now, Mayor Reeves, you will return to City Hall and prepare a press statement fully supporting the state's intervention. Mr. Griffin, you will inform your union members that any officer found complicit in Keller's extortion ring has until close of business today to turn in their badge and cooperate with the state, or they will face federal RICO charges. Naomi walked around the desk, opening the glass door to the bullpen. Every officer in the room was standing perfectly still, terrified. Listen up. Naomi's voice boomed across the precinct, commanding absolute attention. My name is Captain Naomi Langford. As of this moment, the Oakridge Police Department is under the direct operational control of the State Attorney General. The old way of doing business is dead. If you are here to protect the Constitution and serve the public, you will thrive. If you are here to serve yourselves, your egos, or your prejudices, she paused, letting her gaze sweep over the room, ensuring every single officer felt the weight of her promise. You will end up exactly where Vance Keller is right now. Dismissed. While Captain Naomi Langford was systematically dismantling the corrupt hierarchy inside the Oakridge precinct, a heavily armed convoy of black unmarked SUVs was tearing up the pristine imported gravel driveway of the Keller family estate. Arthur Keller, a man who had treated the town of Oakridge as his personal fiefdom for decades, was enjoying his morning espresso on the veranda when the front gates were breached. He was a silver-haired patrician figure, accustomed to a life where a single phone call could bury a scandal or ruin a career. When he saw the tactical teams pouring out of the vehicles clad in windbreakers with bright yellow FBI lettering across the back, he didn't panic. He simply assumed there had been a colossal administrative error. What is the meaning of this? Arthur bellowed, tightening the belt of his silk robe as he marched toward the heavy mahogany front doors, flanked by his private security detail. Before his guards could even reach for their holsters, the doors were thrown open. A dozen federal agents swarmed the grand foyer, their weapons drawn and leveled. Special Agent Thomas Reynolds, a veteran investigator with the DOJ's Public Corruption Unit, stepped forward, holding a thick stack of papers. Arthur Keller, we have a federal search and seizure warrant for this property, your vehicles, and all digital assets on the premises. Arthur scoffed, his face flushing with arrogant indignation. "Do you have any idea who I am? I play golf with the federal judge in this district. I'm calling my attorney, and then I am having every single one of your badges for this stunt." "You can call whoever you like, Mr. Keller," Agent Reynolds replied, completely unbothered. "But Judge Abernathy didn't sign this. A federal magistrate in D.C. signed it. And considering what your son managed to pull last night, I'd say your golf buddies are going to be losing your number." Arthur's smug expression faltered. "Braden, what does my son have to do with this?" "Your son arrested an undercover state DOJ liaison last night, Captain Naomi Langford," Reynolds stated, watching the color rapidly drain from Arthur's face. "He assaulted her, illegally detained her, and tried to toss her car. Unfortunately for both of you, Captain Langford had already traced the serial numbers on the cash your son has been seizing from undocumented drivers on Route 9. Cash that, according to our forensic accountants, has been making its way into an LLC registered to this exact address." Arthur stumbled back, his legs suddenly weak. The untouchable fortress he had built was crumbling in seconds. The arrogance that had fueled his family's reign was instantly replaced by the icy grip of terror. "Tear it apart," Reynolds ordered his team. For hours, the Keller estate was meticulously deconstructed. The true twist, the secret that Arthur thought he would take to his grave, was hidden behind a false wall in his climate-controlled wine cellar. When the FBI technicians breached the steel safe hidden behind the masonry, they didn't just find the thousands of dollars in extorted cash Braden had funneled to him. They found the ledgers. Arthur Keller hadn't just been stealing from the citizens of Oakridge. He had been using the local police department's evidence lockup as a staging ground for a regional narcotics syndicate. Braden's midnight shift wasn't just pulling over minorities for petty theft. They were intercepting rival drug shipments, seizing the contraband under the guise of police work, and passing it up the chain to Arthur, who resold it. It was a multi-million-dollar racketeering enterprise operating under the protection of a police badge. Back at the state penitentiary, Vance Keller was sitting in a windowless interrogation room. He had been stripped of his tailored uniform and forced into a scratchy neon-orange county jumpsuit. The heavy steel door clicked open, and he looked up, expecting his father's high-priced defense attorney. Instead, Captain Naomi Langford walked in, accompanied by Agent Reynolds. Naomi placed a thick manila envelope on the metal table. She sat down across from Vance, her posture perfect, her expression entirely neutral. "Where is my lawyer?" Vance croaked, his voice raw from hours of panic. "Where is my father?" "Your father is currently being processed at the federal courthouse," Naomi said softly. She opened the envelope and slid a dozen 8x10 glossy photographs across the table. "These were taken hours ago at your family estate." Vance's eyes darted down to the photos. He saw his father, handcuffed, being led out of his mansion. He saw the FBI agents hauling out boxes of the ledgers. He saw the bricks of cash and the vacuum-sealed bags of narcotics laid out on the hood of an FBI cruiser. "No," Vance whispered, shaking his head. "No, you can't. We own that town. You can't do this. You owned a house of cards, Vance. And last night your arrogance blew it down," Naomi replied. "Officer Nolan has fully cooperated." He turned over his body cam footage and provided a detailed sworn statement outlining every illegal stop, every falsified report, and every dollar you stole over the years. "The state is offering you one deal. You plead guilty to the civil rights violations, the assault, and the extortion. You testify against your father and the cartel associates he was doing business with. Vance looked up, tears of absolute despair welling in his eyes. The realization that his life was completely over hit him with the force of a freight train. There would be no desk duty. There would be no union protection. He was a disgraced cop headed for federal prison. "And if I don't?" he asked, his voice trembling. "If you don't," Agent Reynolds interjected, leaning over the table, "we charge you under the RICO Act, alongside your father. You'll be looking at decades without the possibility of parole. You'll be an ex-cop in a federal penitentiary for the rest of your natural life." The silence in the room was deafening. Vance stared at the photos of his ruined empire, the weight of his own profound stupidity crushing the breath out of his lungs. He had pulled over a black woman in a nice car because he thought she was an easy mark. He had thought he was the apex predator. Instead, he had pulled over the architect of his own destruction. Vance buried his face in his hands and began to sob uncontrollably. "Where do I sign?" he choked out. Months later, the suffocating humidity of late summer hung heavy over Philadelphia. But inside the federal courthouse, the air was frigid and charged with electric anticipation. The gallery was packed shoulder to shoulder, leaving standing room only. Local journalists, state officials, and most importantly, dozens of Oakridge citizens who had spent years living in quiet fear squeezed into the polished oak pews. They had come to witness what they once believed was impossible. At the defense table sat Arthur and Vance Keller. The contrast between the men they had been and the men they were now was jarring, a visceral testament to their spectacular fall from grace. Arthur, once a patrician kingmaker who wore bespoke suits like armor, had aged a decade in months. His perfectly coiffed silver hair had thinned, turning a dull, lifeless white, and his skin hung loosely on a newly frail frame. The drab, oversized khaki of his federal inmate uniform stripped him of the only thing he ever truly valued, his manufactured superiority. Beside him, Vance sat hunched. His shoulders caved inward as he stared blankly at the scratches on the heavy wooden table. The arrogant, untouchable swagger of the cop who used Car 42 as his personal hunting blind was completely gone. In its place was a hollow, trembling shell of a man. He couldn't bring himself to turn around. He could feel the eyes of the gallery boring into the back of his neck, the piercing stares of the very people he had terrorized under the cover of night. Captain Naomi Langford sat in the front row of the gallery. She wore her immaculate Class A dress uniform, the silver eagles on her collar catching the dim overhead light. She sat perfectly still, her posture rigid, her expression a mask of quiet, irresolute dignity. She wasn't here to gloat, and she wasn't here for vengeance. She was here to ensure the ledger was finally balanced. The heavy wooden door behind the bench swung open and the bailiff's voice rang out, bringing the entire room to its feet. As the federal judge took his seat, the rustling of clothing settled into an absolute, deafening silence. The air was heavy with the weight of impending justice. The judge adjusted his reading glasses, looking down at the two men with a gaze that held nothing but profound, icy disgust. "Arthur Keller," the judge's voice boomed, the sound echoing off the high, vaulted ceiling of the courtroom. You used the public trust as a shield for your own insatiable greed. You corrupted a police department from the inside out, endangered the lives of your own sworn officers, and preyed upon the vulnerable citizens you were meant to protect. You built a criminal empire and had the audacity to call it a community. For the charges of racketeering, extortion, and narcotics trafficking, I sentence you to 35 years in federal prison. A collective shuddering gasp rippled through the gallery. Arthur's knees seemed to buckle beneath the table. He slumped heavily into his chair, burying his face in his trembling, liver-spotted hands as a quiet, broken sob escaped his lips. The judge shifted his cold stare to the sun. Vance Keller, you betrayed the badge. You used the color of law to terrorize innocent people based on your own vile prejudices and fragile ego. You are a disgrace to the uniform and a clear danger to civil society. Despite your 11th hour cooperation with the federal government, the severity and cruelty of your civil rights violations cannot and will not be overlooked. I sentence you to 15 years in federal prison to be served in a maximum security facility. Bang! The heavy wooden gavel slammed down. The sound cracked through the room like a gunshot, signaling the definitive, irreversible end of the Keller dynasty. Federal marshals immediately moved in, hauling the two disgraced men to their feet. The heavy steel chains around their wrists and ankles clinked rhythmically as they were led out a side door, their legacies reduced to nothing more than a cautionary tale of hubris. Naomi stood up slowly, meticulously adjusting the hem of her uniform jacket. She walked out of the hushed courthouse and stepped into the bright, blinding afternoon sun. She took a deep breath, the city air tasting surprisingly clean and light. An hour later, Naomi was behind the wheel of her slate-gray BMW, driving back down the winding, tree-lined stretch of Route 9. It was the exact path she had taken on that fateful night. But the world looked entirely different in the daylight. She drove past the all-night Texaco gas station. The harsh fluorescent lights were off now, the pavement baking quietly in the summer sun. It was just a gas station again, no longer a trap set by a predator lurking in a patrol car. She pulled into the Oakridge Police Department parking lot. The atmosphere radiating from the brick building was completely transformed. The suffocating tension, the unspoken fear, and the toxic, hyper-masculine bravado that had once choked the hallways were entirely gone, scrubbed away by the relentless light of federal scrutiny. As Naomi walked through the heavy double doors of the precinct, the officers in the bullpen looked up from their desks. They didn't part in fear, nor did they look away in guilty silence. They nodded with genuine, earned respect. The department had been thoroughly purged. Dozens of corrupt officers had been federally indicted alongside the Keller family. The police union had been dismantled and restructured under strict, unforgiving state oversight. In their place, a new wave of diverse, highly trained, and thoroughly vetted recruits moved through the room with professional purpose. Officer Bryce Nolan, now wearing the newly minted crisp chevrons of a corporal on his sleeves, stood up from his desk and approached her. He stood taller now, the nervous hesitation of a rookie entirely burned away. He had testified flawlessly at the federal trials, enduring the wrath of the old guard and proving that integrity could still be salvaged from a profoundly broken system. "Good morning, Captain," Nolan said, a confident, genuine smile on his face as he handed her a thick stack of community outreach reports. The neighborhood watch meeting is scheduled for this evening. The community leaders are already setting up the gymnasium. They're eager to meet with you. Thank you, Corporal, Naomi said, taking the file. She paused, looking out over the bustling bullpen. The phones were ringing with routine calls. Officers were quietly discussing case files, and the department was finally functioning exactly as it was meant to, as a pillar of protection, not a syndicate of fear. Naomi walked into her glass-walled office, the bright afternoon sun streaming through the large windows, banishing any lingering shadows that Arthur Keller had left behind. She placed her cap on the heavy oak desk and sat down in her leather chair. She looked at her reflection in the glass, the gold shield gleaming proudly over her heart. Oakridge was no longer a town ruled by untouchable men. The predators had been locked in cages. The deep-rooted corruption had been dragged out into the blinding light, and a new era had firmly taken root. Naomi Langford had come to clean house, and she had left it spotless. The heavy, unyielding hand of karma had finally struck back, proving once and for all that no one, no matter how much money or power they possess, is ever truly above the law. If this story of absolute justice, shocking twists, and hard-hitting karma resonated with you, then you know how important it is to stand up to corruption. Captain Naomi Langford proved that no matter how much power the corrupt think they hold, the truth will always shine through, and karma never misses its mark. Real leadership is about protecting the vulnerable, not exploiting them. Did you see that massive twist coming when the FBI raided the Keller estate? Let us know what you thought of Vance's epic downfall in the comments below. We love bringing you these intense, real-life-inspired dramas of justice being served. Don't forget to smash that like button. Share this video with your friends to spread the message of accountability. And subscribe to our channel for more incredible stories of karma hitting back hard. Hit the notification bell so you never miss an upload.